Hello, this is Dirk de Jong from Boris Effects. I'm here in Adobe After Effects to show a technique for using BCC Particle Array 3D to make effects where objects can seem to form out of particles or to sort of dissolve apart into particles. And if I preview this effect, this is the finished effect, which I'll provide the comp as a downloadable file, so someone can kind of deconstruct it after the fact. But I will show the basic idea of building this effect, and maybe show a couple other ideas about where it might be able to be used, this type of effect. Okay, so why don't we start with this element here, and just to show you what I have here, this is a, let's actually reclaim a little screen space here. So this is a AE color solid. I use the After Effects auto trace feature to isolate the silhouette of this basketball player, and if I enable masks, you can see that. So there's a mask there, and there's this gradient ramp applied to that. So that's this element, and I've put it in its own comp because having Adobe After Effects plugins access an alternate layer as a map, which is what I'm going to do with this, it's good to have it be a comp size solid, so I just nested it. I put this layer in a comp, and I'm going to use that comp actually as a source. So Sports 02 basketball, I'm going to just grab this and create our own comp with it here. And so there we have it. Let me just turn it off for now, and I'm going to create a comp size solid, and I'm going to apply from the BCC particles category, BCC Particle Array 3D, and that's what it looks like by default. We're actually not going to use it for a very 3D looking effect, which is what it does by default. So let me turn off the built-in lights. I'm going to go in the render group. I'm going to turn off anti-aliasing, turn off particle intersection. So those are all things that are going to speed up our preview, and because we don't need some of those options. 3D spheres as particles in the particle group, we'll change that to image collection. This default round blur image is fine. I'll go ahead and make the color full white. And I'll make the transfer mode be screen. That'll make a difference later on. And I close up, actually let's make the size, bring that down a bit as well. Now the array group and the transform group. So you can just see this is a 3D array, and it supports After Effects lights and cameras, but we're not actually going to be using those features in this particular effect. Number of particles in Z, I'm just going to bring that down to 2. Now, and the Z scale, I'm just going to bring these two layers very close together. I'm just going to kind of use them to create a little bit more compositing later on, a little bit more depth to it. But this would also work if it was just one particle deep. So I'm going to adjust scale X and scale Y so that my array is just about full frame. And then I'm going to adjust the number of particles X and Y so that we have a nice dense particle screen. And I'm going to go back into the particle group, and particle color set to single color, which is white here by default. I'm going to set it to layer XY. It turned blue because my color solid is blue, and that's what it's using by default, but I'm going to tell it to use this basketball layer. So you can see that it's already, tweak this a little bit. I'm going to bring these really close together. If I turn the checkerboard, you see that, where there was transparency, there are no particles, so it's following the silhouette of this basketball player. And actually, let me set this particle layers blend mode to screen. Be a little bit easier to see here over the basketball layer when we look at it there later. So let's take a look at some of these features in BCC Particle Array. You know, by the way, this is of course still this 3D, and that's what we're looking at is two layers of those particles. Dispersion, I'm going to give it all some dispersion, and so it's mapped uniformly over the particle array. And we give it a little bit of fractal noise as well. Now, I'm going to go to the main group we're going to be using here to achieve this, the interesting dynamic part of this effect is control maps. Give you a quick idea of what control maps do, and then we're going to use kind of a simple feature of them. So I'm going to open this control map 1, and set it to apply to the disperse effect. There's different elements of the control map. There's a graph control, a layer control, and a wipe control. This graph control, if I set it to use on the y-axis and I open up this custom graph, you see what we have here. So I can basically use this graph over the y-axis. It's applying the disperse effect, and if I choose something there, so now it should be, there's kind of a lump in the middle there where it's dispersed, and at either end it's not. You know, you can create some sort of interesting effects with this graph, as well as actually if you know exactly what you want to do here, and you can you know, kind of hand draw something there that's going to give you the dispersion according to this graph. So there are lots of effects where you might want to use this. In this case, we're not going to use the graph. So let me close it up. Layer control will basically let the lumar alpha of another layer apply to where this dispersion is going to happen in the array. And the wipe control, which we're going to set to top to bottom, is you know, gives you a variety of wipes, as you can see here. But we're just going to use top to bottom, which is a pretty basic one. And I'm going to go to the first frame and create a keyframe, and I'll go a few seconds in and bring this down to 0. So if I show keyframes for this layer, you see what it's doing. So the dispersion wipes, so it might be easier to see if I settle down my fractal noise a little bit. But you see the dispersion wipe from bottom to top, because we animated it from 100 to 0. And now what we'll do is we'll do a similar thing with control map 2, but we're going to apply it to the fractal noise map, and we'll say top to bottom again. And I'm going to, since I want them to keyframe at the same time, I'm going to alt click on the stopwatch for wipe progress for this one, and that adds an expression to this parameter, and I'm just going to grab the pick whip and connect it to the wipe progress that we already did there. So now you basically see it's wiping both the noise map, the fractal noise, and the dispersion at the same time. And we're going to use one more control map here. I'm going to set it to shift. We haven't set any shift values yet, but let's just move that over here. So I'm shifting in X, putting it off screen left there, a little bit further. And again, we'll do top to bottom, and again, connect the wipe progress from this to the original one that we've keyframed. So that's what it's doing there, and I want to make that, turn down that smoothness for the effect we want. And now that we're really moving it that way, let me make some final adjustments to the fractal noise. This, so you have frequency control, is more frequency, less. I want to make this look kind of like a smoky kind of wave motion. All right, so that's pretty good. And put it off screen all the way here. All right, so control map 1, 2, and 3, and those built-in features of Particle Array 3D are giving us that animation, which is a pretty good start to the effect that we want to make here. So what next? Let me enable this layer, which is the actual silhouette, and you can see now with this layer on that these particles do come in and fill that area and match nicely. The thing I want to do is I want to create a wipe, and rather than keyframing an After Effects mask and adding an After Effects mask, I'm actually just going to use, this will be quicker in this case, and BCC 8 transitions. I'm going to use Linear Wipe, and I'll change that from the direction of 90 degrees to 0. Give it some softness, and so then this wipe amount is what I'll animate up and down. So if I go right about here where the foot is starting to get filled in, I'll wipe this down, make a keyframe, and then right about there, bring that up. So here, it's kind of, that layer's drawing on with the particles. And then what I'm going to do is go to the first keyframe of this wipe. I'm going to copy the whole effect to the clipboard, and then I'm going to apply it to the particle layer. So the particles disappeared, but I'm just going to check this box that says invert wipe. So now we have this, which is pretty good, but you can see I want to, I don't want that transparency in there. So I'm going to just look at animated parameters again, and specifically we want the wipe keyframes, and select them and go this way with it. So the wipe of the particles is a little bit behind the wipe of the layer, which is going to work out well, I think. All right. What else did we have going here? One thing that we're going to come back to in a minute, I'm not going to leave it on for now, but if I simply just turn on motion blur, you get that nice simulated motion blur for the particles, and that's going to help the look of the effect a lot. I'll leave it off for now because things preview a lot faster without it. Let me create a new adjustment layer, and I'm going to go into the BCC Film Style category and apply Film Glow. Let's give it a little threshold, a little crosstalk, and turn up the intensity a little bit. So there's a glow on there. I think I also put on the original effect we looked at from the lights category a glint. Pump up the threshold of that as well. So that's it with glow and glint. It's already starting to have a little bit more of the feel of the effect we want there. One other thing it definitely had, though, that I want to include, if we go back here and look, is it had these light rays that were sort of seeming to emanate from the part right where the particles are kind of fusing into the solid silhouette there. So let's see how we go about doing something like that. think what I'm going to do, actually, because I want it to apply to both the particle layer and the underlying silhouette layer, I'm going to do another new adjustment layer. Let's put it under the glow. And that one, I can just sort of trim that to be only around where that wipe occurs. So that's probably good enough there. And into the BCC lights category again, I'm going to choose a Rays Puffy. That's a good light rays effect for us to use here, I think. Rather than colorize, which allows this gradient to define the colors, I'm going to set that to image. I'm going to set the blend mode to screen and increase the ray length a bit. And so that's it just as a static light rays effect. You can see it already kind of adding something, but we're going to need to keyframe that a bit. So why don't I go down here and make a keyframe for light source, and that's light source, and I'll put that down here and go to where just after the wipe finishes. Get the light source up here. So look at that at full res. It looks the same at 50%. So now you can see the light rays animating. Now that light rays is a bit much, so I'm going to use the built-in pixel chooser in the light rays effect. So I just turn that on, close some of this up to get us some more screen space. Just going to use the region part of the pixel chooser. So I'm going to set the shape to distance to light. That's the choice here. And actually, just so you can see what it's doing, let me just say view chosen pixels. So that's what distance to light does. It does a uniform distance, and it just follows wherever the light source is going. And let's I think we can have it a lot smaller. Maybe, let's see here. You can stretch it. So now it's going to move like that. And let's just go ahead and turn it on. And actually, right now it's masking the output of the light, but I want it to be set to source light. That's going to allow the light rays to extend beyond the edges of that pixel chooser. So now if I increase ray length, so something like that might be pretty good. So now if we look at this all together, I'm going to preview to RAM and I'll go ahead and turn on some of the motion blur. Could have started the preview a few frames later there. And obviously, if we keyframe such an effect in the opposite direction, we'll just be, you kind of have this effect of the object dissolving into particles rather than being formed out of particles. So that's the basic idea of making such an effect. And in the case of this version of the effect, all I did was to add in a few more silhouettes and duplicate my particle array effects. and then reassign them so that they were using the other silhouettes. And I used shift this way. The middle one is shift Y. It comes from up above, and shift in the other direction to come from the other side. And then I did one to the title where it goes horizontally. The wipe and the light rays effect. And so that's basically how it's built. Just for fun here, I did another effect, basically using the same effect in another context. So if let me just set this to loop. Here I used it as a kind of transition into like a live action shot. Again, I did sort of a simple, crude masking of her shape on a freeze frame. And then there's sort of a little glitch, which is Boris BCC damaged TV for a second there on an adjustment layer. And then I start to move at its real speed. And then since all my other examples were actually on static elements, here I just applied it to moving video. So if you see here, it's basically this woman was dancing in front of a white background, and so I just applied a luma key and a choke to give that sort of those white borders on there. But you can see how the same effect, and actually in this case, I also used there's a twist parameter in the particle array to give it sort of a more obvious kind of tornado-like twist to it. And so this same effect can be, the same strategy can be used on moving video. If the video object moves around a lot and changes shape a lot, you'll see the particle, you'll see that in the particle seeming to jitter or flicker around a little bit. But that also can be a useful look as well. So that's a quick look at using Particle Array 3D as a sort of a transition to bring objects on or off the screen.